David and Lisa had been married for 3 years, and they were eagerly waiting for the birth of their first child. Lisa was 9 months pregnant, and her due date was only a few weeks away. She had been feeling fine for the past few days, so when David told her he was going on a short trip with his friends, she didn't argue much. She trusted him, and he assured her that he would be back soon. However, deep inside, Lisa felt uneasy. That morning, David and Lisa got into the car. He was supposed to drop her off at her mother's house before heading to the airport. Lisa's mother had promised to take care of her while he was away. The car ride was quiet at first, but as they drove down the long road, Lisa suddenly felt a sharp pain in her stomach. She took a deep breath, thinking it might be normal, but within minutes, the pain returned, this time much stronger. Lisa's heart started pounding. She had read about labor pains, and this felt exactly like what she had feared. She looked at David, her face filled with worry. "David, I think the baby is coming," she whispered, clutching her belly. David glanced at her, frowning. "Are you sure? It's probably just a small pain." "We still have time," he said, keeping his eyes on the road. Lisa shook her head. "No, this is serious. I need to get to the hospital. Now." David sighed, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. He was already running late, and turning back would mean missing his flight. He had been planning this trip for months, and all his friends were waiting for him. He didn't want to cancel everything at the last minute. "We're almost at your mom's house," he said, trying to stay calm. "She can take you to the hospital." But the pain only got worse. Lisa gasped, gripping the seat tightly. "David, please, I don't think I can wait that long." Her voice was filled with desperation. David slowed the car and pulled over to the side of the road. They were in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but empty fields around them. Lisa looked at him, confused. "Call an ambulance," David said, unlocking her phone and handing it to her. "I really can't miss this flight." Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. Was he really leaving her here? She felt a mix of fear and heartbreak. "David, you can't just go," she cried, tears filling her eyes. But David had already grabbed his bag. He stepped out of the car, looking at her one last time. "You'll be fine. Just call someone," he said before walking away. Lisa sat there, stunned, as she watched him disappear down the road. The pain was unbearable, and she knew she didn't have much time. With shaking hands, she tried to dial for help, but her phone had a weak signal. Her vision blurred with tears as panic set in. She was all alone, and the baby was coming. Lisa sat in the car, her hands trembling as she tried to steady her breathing. The pain in her stomach was getting worse, and she knew she didn't have much time. She kept staring at the road where David had just walked away, hoping he would change his mind and come back. But he didn't. He was really gone. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked down at her phone. She needed to call for help. With shaky fingers, she dialed the emergency number, but the signal was weak. The call wouldn't go through. Panic filled her mind. She was stuck on an empty road with no one around, and the baby was coming. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she clenched her fists. She couldn't believe that David had left her like this. They had promised to be there for each other, to take care of one another no matter what. And now, when she needed him the most, he had chosen to leave. The pain in her heart was just as strong as the pain in her stomach. She tried to take deep breaths, remembering what the doctor had told her about staying calm during labor. But it was hard. Her body was in pain, her mind was filled with fear, and she felt completely helpless. She opened the car door and stepped out slowly, hoping to see someone. Anyone who could help her. The road stretched far in both directions, empty and silent. The sky was clear, and the sun was shining, but Lisa felt like she was trapped in a nightmare. She placed her hands on her belly and whispered, "It's going to be okay, baby. Mommy's going to find help." She took a few steps forward, her legs weak from the pain. She didn't know where she was going, but she had to do something. Standing in one place wasn't an option. Every step felt heavier than the last, and soon she had to stop and lean against the car. Just then, she heard a faint sound in the distance. Was it a car? She turned her head quickly, her heart racing with hope. A small figure was walking toward her. As the person got closer, Lisa saw that it was an elderly woman with gray hair and a kind face. The woman was carrying a small bag and looked surprised to see Lisa standing by the car, clutching her belly. "Oh dear, are you okay?" the woman asked, her voice full of concern. Lisa felt relief wash over her. "Please, I'm in labor. I need to get to a hospital," she said, her voice shaking. The woman's eyes widened. "Oh my goodness. Hold on, sweetheart. Let's get you some help," she said, pulling out her phone. Lisa felt like crying again, but this time it wasn't because of fear. Someone had finally stopped to help her. Maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. The older woman quickly took out her phone and tried to call an ambulance. Lisa stood there, breathing heavily, holding onto the car for support. The pain was getting worse, and she knew she didn't have much time. Her body was trembling, and her legs felt weak. The woman, who introduced herself as Margaret, placed a gentle hand on Lisa's shoulder. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Help is coming," she said in a soothing voice. But as she looked at her phone, her face changed. "Oh no, there's no signal here," she whispered. Lisa's heart sank. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice filled with fear. Margaret looked around, thinking fast. "There's a small town a few miles ahead. My house is nearby. We can go there and call for help." Lisa hesitated. Walking even a few steps felt impossible, but she had no choice. She nodded weakly. "Okay, please, help me." Margaret quickly moved to support Lisa, wrapping an arm around her. "Lean on me, dear. We'll go slowly." Step by step, they began moving down the road. Lisa tried to stay strong, but every few minutes, another sharp contraction hit her, making her gasp in pain. Margaret held onto her tightly. "Breathe, sweetheart. Just like this. Slow and steady." Lisa followed Margaret's instructions, trying to focus on her breathing. "Thank you," she whispered. Margaret gave her a warm smile. "You remind me of my daughter. She had a difficult labor too, but she made it through, and so will you." Hearing those words gave Lisa a little bit of strength. She kept walking, even though it felt like the longest journey of her life. After a few more painful steps, they reached a small house by the side of the road. Margaret quickly led Lisa inside and helped her sit down on a couch. "Stay right here, dear. I'll try to call for help again." Lisa nodded, breathing heavily. Sweat covered her forehead, and she could feel her heartbeat pounding in her ears. The pain was getting worse, and she was starting to feel scared. Margaret tried to call a hospital again, but the call wouldn't go through. She sighed in frustration and turned back to Lisa. "Still no luck, but don't you worry. I'll go outside and see if I can find someone passing by." Lisa grabbed her hand. "Please, don't leave me alone," she begged. Margaret's heart softened. "Oh, honey, I won't. I'll stay right here with you." She sat down beside Lisa and held her hand tightly. "You are not alone. I promise." Lisa felt tears run down her cheeks, but this time, they weren't just from the pain. For the first time since David left, she didn't feel completely helpless. Someone cared. Someone was here for her. She squeezed Margaret's hand, trying to hold on. The baby was coming, and all she could do now was hope that help would arrive in time. As the minutes ticked by, the pain in Lisa's body grew more intense. She sat on the couch, her hands gripping the fabric as waves of contractions came and went. Margaret remained by her side, offering what little comfort she could. She kept speaking softly to Lisa, reminding her to breathe slowly and stay calm. But Lisa's mind was a whirlwind of fear and exhaustion. "I can't do this," Lisa whispered, her voice shaking. Margaret gave her a reassuring smile. "Yes, you can. You're stronger than you know." But Lisa didn't feel strong. She felt as if her body was betraying her. The pain seemed endless, and every minute felt like an hour. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her breath became ragged. She closed her eyes, trying to push through it, but it was hard. She needed help, and she needed it now. Just then, there was a sound outside. A car engine, growing louder. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. Could it be an ambulance? Could help finally be here? Margaret hurried to the door and peeked outside. A small blue car had pulled up, and a man in a uniform stepped out. "Thank God!" Margaret exclaimed, rushing out to meet him. Lisa could hear their voices, but she couldn't make out the words. All she could do was hold onto the couch, her body still trembling. The man, who was a paramedic, quickly walked into the house. "Where is she?" he asked, his eyes scanning the room. Margaret pointed to Lisa, who was still sitting on the couch, looking pale and exhausted. "She's the one. She's in labor, and we couldn't get a signal. We need help. Now." The paramedic immediately rushed to her side. "It's okay, ma'am. We're here. You're going to be just fine." Lisa, too weak to respond, simply nodded. She felt a wave of relief wash over her. Help had arrived. Someone was finally here to take care of her. The paramedic gently checked her condition. "You're doing great, but we need to get you to the hospital right away. Just a few more minutes, and you'll be there." Lisa's mind barely registered his words. The pain in her body was all-consuming, and it took every ounce of strength she had just to keep breathing. The baby was coming fast, faster than she had expected. "Is there time?" she asked weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. The paramedic looked at her with serious eyes. "We're going to do our best, but it's happening now." Margaret stayed by Lisa's side, offering soft words of comfort. "Stay with us, sweetheart. You're doing amazing." With the paramedics' help, they carefully moved Lisa into the back of the ambulance. The sound of the doors closing felt like a small victory. Lisa's breathing was shallow, but she knew that she wasn't alone anymore. She was finally going to be okay. As the ambulance sped down the road, Lisa's mind wandered back to David. She had never imagined she would be in this position, without him by her side. But right now, in this moment, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt hope. The journey wasn't over yet, but she was no longer alone. And that was all that mattered. The moment Lisa arrived at the hospital, the medical staff sprang into action. The paramedics quickly wheeled her into the emergency room, where doctors and nurses surrounded her, preparing for the birth. Despite the overwhelming pain, Lisa couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. She was finally where she needed to be, and the nightmare of being abandoned by David was starting to fade into the background. The hospital staff moved with precision, their voices calm and focused. Lisa tried to keep her breathing steady, but it was difficult. Her contractions were coming rapidly now, and she could feel the baby getting closer to being born. Margaret, who had stayed with her throughout the entire journey, remained by her side, holding her hand and offering gentle words of encouragement. "You're doing so well, dear," Margaret said softly. "Stay strong." Lisa nodded, grateful for the support. She had never imagined that the day would unfold this way. Everything she had planned, everything she had hoped for, seemed so far away. She had expected David to be there, to hold her hand through every moment. But instead, he had left her stranded in the middle of nowhere. It was a thought she couldn't shake, even as the doctors and nurses did their best to focus on the birth. The birth itself was quick but painful. Lisa's body pushed against her will, and she struggled to keep calm. The doctors worked quickly, reassuring her that everything would be fine. But inside, she felt a deep sense of betrayal. She thought of how David had just walked away, leaving her to face the most difficult moment of her life alone. After what felt like an eternity, the cries of her baby filled the room. Lisa's heart swelled with relief, and her exhaustion melted away for a brief moment as she heard the sound of life. "It's a girl," the doctor said, holding up the tiny bundle. Tears filled Lisa's eyes as they placed the baby on her chest. She felt a rush of love for her daughter, a love so deep that it overshadowed everything else. In that moment, she knew she would do anything to protect this little life, no matter what it took. But even as she looked at her newborn daughter, a feeling of emptiness lingered in her heart. David wasn't here. The man she had trusted had abandoned her, and now she was left to navigate motherhood on her own. Word quickly spread about what had happened, and Lisa's family was already on their way to the hospital. Her parents, who had been worried sick when they heard the news, arrived just as she was settling into her hospital bed, holding her baby girl. The moment they walked in, the room filled with love and warmth. Her mother rushed to her side, hugging her tightly. "You're okay, sweetheart," she said softly. "You made it through." Lisa felt the weight of her mother's arms around her, and for the first time that day, she felt truly safe. Her parents sat beside her, their eyes full of concern and love as they looked at their granddaughter. "She's beautiful," Lisa's father said, smiling through tears. But as Lisa sat there, surrounded by her family, her mind kept returning to David. She couldn't understand how he had left her when she needed him the most. How could someone who promised to be there for her abandon her without a second thought? The anger bubbled up inside her, but she quickly pushed it aside. Right now, she had more important things to focus on: her baby, her family, and the future. The hours passed, and while Lisa recovered physically, her heart remained heavy. She knew she would have to face David sooner or later, but for now, she found comfort in her daughter's tiny fingers wrapping around hers, a symbol of strength and resilience. She had made it through the hardest part. Now, she would move forward. She was no longer alone. The days that followed Lisa's stay in the hospital were a blur of emotions. Her baby girl, whom she named Emma, was the sweetest little thing. Every time she looked at her, Lisa felt an overwhelming sense of love. Holding her daughter in her arms, she forgot for a moment about the pain of the past few days. Emma was healthy and strong, and that was all that mattered now. But deep inside, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. She had tried calling David a few times after the birth, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Her anger grew with every unanswered call. How could he not even check in? How could he just leave her on the side of the road when she was in the most vulnerable place she had ever been? Every time she thought about it, the pain seemed to sting even more. One afternoon, as she sat in her hospital room with her parents, Lisa's phone finally rang. She glanced at the screen, and her heart skipped a beat. It was David. He had finally called. Taking a deep breath, Lisa answered. "Hello." "Lisa," David's voice sounded hesitant. "It's me. I just wanted to see how you're doing." Lisa clenched her fists, the anger surging again. "How am I doing?" she repeated. "Do you really want to know how I'm doing, David? You left me, alone, in labor, on the side of the road. How do you think I'm doing?" David's voice faltered. "Lisa, No." Lisa interrupted, her voice shaking with emotion. "You don't get to apologize now. You don't get to pretend like everything is fine. I had to deliver my baby with the help of a stranger because you decided your trip was more important than your wife and child." David was silent for a moment. Lisa could feel the weight of his regret through the phone. "I'm so sorry," he finally said. "I didn't know what to do. I thought it wasn't serious, and I thought you'd be fine. I never meant to hurt you. I was wrong." The words didn't make Lisa feel any better. She had been in so much pain, physically and emotionally, and the man she loved had walked away when she needed him most. It was too much to forgive in a single phone call. "You can't just say sorry and expect everything to be okay, David," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I can trust you again. Not after what you did." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Lisa's heart was racing, and she knew she needed to make a decision. This wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about protecting herself and Emma. "I don't want to talk to you right now," she finally said. "I need time. We both need time to think about what's happened." David's voice softened. "Please, Lisa, don't do this. I made a huge mistake. I want to make it right. I love you and I love Emma. But Lisa knew, deep down, that words weren't enough. She couldn't forget what had happened. I'll need time, David. Time to figure out what I want. But right now, I need to focus on my daughter. With that, she ended the call. As the days went by, Lisa found strength in the support of her family. Her mother and father were always by her side, offering comfort and care. Emma's smile brought her joy in ways she had never imagined. Lisa had no idea what the future would hold, or if she would ever be able to trust David again. But one thing was clear: she would protect Emma with all her heart. David's apology was a start, but it didn't change the fact that Lisa had to navigate motherhood on her own. She realized, with the love and strength of her family, that she didn't need anyone to define her happiness. She was going to be okay, no matter what. In the weeks that followed, Lisa began to settle into a routine with her baby girl, Emma. Life felt different now, and it wasn't just because of becoming a mother. The weight of what had happened with David still lingered, but she wasn't letting it define her. With every smile from Emma and every quiet moment they shared together, Lisa felt a growing strength inside her. She was learning to navigate the world as a mother, and that was all that mattered. She'd spent countless nights awake, nursing Emma or rocking her to sleep, thinking about everything that had happened. There were times when she felt angry, times when she felt betrayed, and times when she just felt exhausted. But there were also moments when she realized how much Emma had changed her life for the better. This tiny little person was her reason to keep going, no matter what had come before. Her family continued to support her in every way they could. Her parents were overjoyed to be grandparents, and they showered Emma with love. They helped with the baby whenever Lisa needed a break, and they often stayed late just to keep her company, especially during those long, sleepless nights. Yet, despite the warmth from her family, Lisa still felt the gap left by David. She hadn't heard from him since their phone call weeks earlier. Part of her wanted to reach out and let him try to make amends, but another part of her knew that trust couldn't be rebuilt so quickly. There were too many unanswered questions. How could she allow him back into her life after the way he had abandoned her? How could she ever feel secure again if she let him come back without real change? One quiet afternoon, Lisa sat in the park with Emma in her stroller, watching the other parents and children around her. She could feel the weight of the decision she would eventually need to make. Was there a chance that she could forgive David? Was it even worth considering, or had he lost his place in their lives forever? As if in answer, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Lisa pulled it out, and to her surprise, it was a message from David. It had been weeks since their last conversation, and she had almost convinced herself that he wasn't coming back. But now, here he was, reaching out again. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before she opened the message. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I understand why you're upset. I've spent the last few weeks thinking about what happened, and I realize that I hurt you in a way that can't be easily fixed. But I love you, Lisa. I want to do better. I'm sorry, and I'll be here whenever you're ready to talk. Lisa read the message multiple times, the words sinking into her heart. She could feel the sincerity in his words, but could she trust it? Could she trust him again after everything that had happened? She looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her stroller, and felt her heart swell with love. She couldn't make this decision in a moment. She needed time. She needed to process, just as she had done before. David had made his choice, and now it was up to her to make hers. Lisa knew that whatever happened, she would be okay. She would protect Emma and herself, and they would find happiness, no matter what that looked like. Whether David would be a part of that future or not was something only time could tell. But one thing was certain. She was no longer the woman who had been left behind on the side of the road. She was stronger now, and she was ready to face whatever came next. As the days continued to pass, Lisa found herself reflecting on the journey she had been through. It had been hard, so much harder than she had ever imagined. But through all the pain, the loneliness, and the fear, there had been moments of grace. Emma had been her light through it all. Each tiny smile, each gentle coo, reminded Lisa of the incredible love that existed between mother and child. Emma had given her the strength to face every challenge and had brought her joy that she never thought was possible. David's message still lingered in her mind, and for days she thought about whether or not she should respond. Her heart was torn. She had always believed in love, in second chances, but what if trusting David again only led to more hurt? He had left her when she needed him the most, and that wasn't something she could easily forget. But the truth was, she still loved him. It hurt to admit it, but she did. How could she not? They had built a life together, and even though it was now broken, part of her still held on to the hope that things could be repaired. After careful thought, Lisa decided to meet David in person. She didn't know what would come of it, but she needed to hear him out. She wanted to understand if his words were sincere, if he truly meant what he had said in the message. But she also needed to set boundaries. She wouldn't let him back into her life unless she felt it was right, not just for her, but for Emma too. Her daughter's future was now her priority, and nothing could ever come before that. They met at a small cafe in town, a place that had once been their favorite. Lisa sat at a table by the window, nervously glancing at the door. She hadn't seen David in weeks, and the last time they spoke, everything had been so raw. Would this be a chance for healing, or would it only make things worse? When David finally walked in, Lisa's heart skipped a beat. He looked different, like someone who had been carrying a heavy weight for too long. His eyes were tired, but there was a sincerity in them that made Lisa pause. He walked over to the table, hesitating for a moment before sitting down. Neither of them spoke for a while, and the silence between them was thick with unspoken words. Finally, David spoke. "Lisa, I know I've messed up. I know I can't take back what I did, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I spent these weeks thinking about everything. I've been selfish, and I've hurt you in ways I can't even explain. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I want to try. I want to show you that I can be the man you need." Lisa listened carefully, weighing his words. There was no anger now, just a deep sense of sadness and regret. She could see the pain in his face, and for a moment, she almost felt sorry for him. But she quickly reminded herself that it wasn't about pity. It was about what was best for her and Emma. "I don't know, David," Lisa said softly. "I've been through so much. I can't just forget everything that happened. It's hard for me to trust you again, and I need time to figure out what I really want. But I can't let my life be dictated by fear. Emma deserves a future full of love and stability. If you want to be a part of that, you have to prove that you can be there, not just when it's easy, but when it counts." David nodded, his expression earnest. "I will, Lisa. I swear to you. I will prove it. I want to be a part of your life, and I want to be a father to Emma. I understand if you need space, but I'll wait. I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in a long while, Lisa felt a flicker of hope. She didn't know what the future held, and she couldn't promise that things would go back to the way they were. But she also knew that nothing in life was ever certain. What mattered now was taking it one step at a time. As they parted ways that afternoon, Lisa's heart felt lighter. She wasn't ready to make any decisions, but she had started a new chapter. She had learned to stand on her own. And no matter what happened with David, she knew she would always have Emma. Together, they would face whatever challenges the future held. The road ahead wasn't clear, but Lisa was no longer afraid of it. With Emma by her side, she was ready to move forward, one step at a time. The love she had for her daughter was all the strength she needed to keep going, and no matter what, she would always be there to protect her.